The slap echoed through the marble halls of the Wintercrest Palace like a thunderclap, and every wolf in the throne room felt it in their bones. Royal Luna Adelheid stood over the cowering Omega, her hand still raised, her chest heaving with a fury that made the chandeliers tremble. This wasn't just anger. This was vengeance 300 years in the making. "You dare speak of pack law to me?" Adelheid's voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade forged in moonlight. "You, who crawled from the gutters of the Forgotten Quarter, dare invoke the royal decree against someone of my bloodline?" The Omega, a girl named Vraini, barely 20 winters old, with fear-bright eyes and trembling lips, pressed herself against the cold stone floor. She'd made one mistake. One terrible, unforgivable mistake. She'd told the truth. "Before we go any further into this story of betrayal, power, and a love that would shatter kingdoms, I need to know something. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Because what happens next will break your heart before it heals it." The truth Vraini had spoken. That Adelheid herself was born of the forbidden bloodline. That the Royal Luna who'd ruled the northern packs for 7 years with an iron fist and a silver tongue was never supposed to exist at all. That her very blood violated the ancient covenant signed in wolf's blood and sealed with the deaths of 10,000 ancestors. Alpha King Caspar stood at the head of the throne room, his massive frame rigid, his golden eyes locked on the woman he'd called his Luna, his equal, his everything. The woman he'd chosen over council objections, over tradition, over every warning that had been whispered in the dark corners of his reign. His jaw worked but no sound came out. Because he'd known. God's help him, he'd always known. "Caspar." Adelheid turned to him, and her voice carried a softness that somehow made it worse. "Say something." But the Alpha King remained silent, and that silence was louder than any proclamation. It filled the throne room like poison gas, choking everyone present. The royal court, assembled for what should have been a routine hearing about grain distribution to the outer territories, had instead become witness to the unraveling of their entire world. Elder Burkhard stepped forward from the Council of Seven, his ancient face carved with lines of judgment and tradition. His voice, when it came, sounded like stone grinding against stone. "The Omega has invoked pack law. She has called for the blood test. By the covenant of our ancestors, by the oath sworn 3 centuries ago when the Forbidden Wars ended, any member of any pack may challenge the legitimacy of those who rule, if they suspect tainted blood. The girl was within her rights." "Her rights?" Adelheid laughed, but it was a sound without humor, sharp and jagged. "What rights does a kitchen servant have to destroy everything I've built? Everything I've bled for?" "The same rights as any wolf," Elder Burkhard replied. "The blood oath makes no distinction between ranks when it comes to protecting pack purity. You know this, Luna. You, of all people, know this." Oh, the bitter irony in those words. Because Adelheid did know. She'd spent her entire life knowing, hiding, running from the truth that now stood exposed in front of 300 witnesses. Her mother had been Ursula the Unmarked, a name whispered in fear and fascination, a woman from the Shadowborn line, descendants of wolves who'd bred with humans during the Forbidden Wars, diluting the sacred bloodline that kept their kind strong, kept their wolf forms pure, kept their connection to the ancient moon magic intact. The Shadowborn were supposed to be extinct. Hunted down, executed, their names stricken from pack records. But Ursula had survived, hidden in the mountains, and she'd given birth to a daughter with power so potent it could fool even the most ancient bloodline tests. A daughter who could mask her own tainted blood with sheer force of will. That daughter was Adelheid. And now, because of one frightened Omega who'd overheard a conversation she shouldn't have, everything was about to fall apart. Caspar finally moved. He descended from his throne with the controlled grace of a predator, each step measured, each breath visible in the suddenly cold air. Winter had come early to Wintercrest this year, but the cold in that throne room had nothing to do with the weather. "The blood test will be administered," he said, and his voice carried no emotion at all. That was worse than anger, worse than betrayal. It was the voice of a king who'd already made his choice. Adelheid felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart that had shattered years ago, pieced back together so many times it was mostly scar tissue now, but something deeper. Her wolf. The part of her that had bonded with Caspar during their mating ceremony, that had twined around his soul and promised forever. "You won't even defend me?" she asked quietly. "Not even a little." Caspar stopped 3 paces away. Close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the slight tremor in his jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Close enough to remember every moment they'd shared. The first hunt, the first kiss, the first time they'd shifted together under the full moon and run through the forests until dawn painted the sky. "Can you deny it?" he asked just as quietly. And there it was. The question she couldn't answer. Because she'd built her entire life on a foundation of lies so carefully constructed that even she sometimes forgot where the truth ended and the performance began. She'd learned to lie from her mother, who'd lied to survive. She'd perfected it into an art form that let her rise from nothing, a nameless wolf from a mountain village no one had heard of, to become Royal Luna of the Northern Packs. She'd lied about her lineage, her pack affiliation, her very blood. She'd used forbidden magic to alter bloodline tests, had called in favors from witches who dabbled in the dark arts, had murdered. Yes, murdered. 3 people who'd gotten too close to the truth over the years. All to protect this life she'd built. This position of power. This throne. And for what? To be undone by an Omega named Vrainy who'd been in the wrong hallway at the wrong time. "The test," Elder Burkhard repeated. "Now." The elder healer, a woman named Griselda with silver hair bound in traditional braids, stepped forward with a ceremonial blade. The blood oath test was simple in theory, devastating in practice. 3 drops of blood on ancient stone, blessed by the original covenant. If the blood ran clear, the wolf was pure. If it turned black, the wolf carried the taint of human blood, the mark of the Shadowborn, the stain of the forbidden wars. Adelheid looked at the blade, then at Caspar, then back at the cowering Omega who'd started this catastrophe. Vrainy hadn't moved from the floor, hadn't made a sound since that slap. The girl's cheek still bore the red mark of Adelheid's hand, a brand that would fade but never quite disappear from memory. "You could have let me send her away," Adelheid said to Caspar. "A generous posting to the southern territories. Comfortable life. She would have disappeared. And none of this would have happened. And the truth would have remained buried," Caspar replied. "How many more, Adelheid? How many more wolves would you have silenced? Bribed? Killed?" The last word hit like a physical blow. So he knew about that too. About Wendell, the pack historian who'd discovered records he shouldn't have. About Gisela, the former Luna's lady-in-waiting who'd recognized Ursula's eyes in Adelheid's face. About Dietrich, Caspar's own cousin, who'd threatened to expose everything unless Adelheid stepped down. They'd all died in accidents. Convenient accidents. A fall from a tower. A hunting mishap. A sudden illness that took Dietrich in 3 days. His body racked with seizures while the palace healer stood helpless. "For you," Adelheid whispered. "I did it all for you. Was. So we could rule together. So we could be. Built on lies." Caspar's voice broke on the last word, and that crack in his composure was somehow worse than his earlier coldness. "Everything we are, everything we built together, all of it was a lie." "Not all of it." Adelheid reached for him but he stepped back. That single step backward was a chasm. "The love was real. Is real. Caspar, you know it's real." "Do I?" He looked at her like she was a stranger. "How can I know what's real with you? How can I trust anything?" Elder Burkhard cleared his throat, impatient with the drama. The council had no use for romance, for complicated feelings, for the messy reality of hearts that didn't follow pack law. They dealt in bloodlines and tradition, in rules written in blood 3 centuries ago by wolves who'd watched their kind nearly go extinct because too many had forgotten what they were, had bred with humans, had weakened the sacred gifts the moon goddess had bestowed upon them. "The blade, Luna," Griselda said, extending the ceremonial knife. "Your hand." Adelheid looked at her own hands. These hands that had signed royal decrees, that had blessed newborn pups, that had held Casper's face the night he'd proposed to make her his Luna. These hands that had also held poison, that had pushed Wendell from that tower, that had slapped an innocent Omega girl for speaking truth. What would happen if she refused? If she simply said no, walked out of this throne room and let them chase her? She could run. She'd always been good at running. She could disappear into the mountains like her mother had, find some forgotten corner of the world, and live out her days in obscurity. But she'd fought too hard for this position. She'd sacrificed too much. And some part of her, the part that was still her mother's daughter, still marked by the desperation and fear that came from being born wrong, refused to give these sanctimonious wolves the satisfaction. "Fine," she said. "Test me. Expose me. Strip me of every title, every honor, every shred of dignity. But before you do, let me tell you something about your precious pack purity." She turned to address the assembled court, her voice rising with power and fury. 3 centuries ago, your ancestors decided that any wolf who'd bred with humans during the Forbidden Wars was tainted, unclean, less than. They hunted down entire families, children, babies still nursing at their mothers' breasts. They slaughtered thousands in the name of purity, in the name of tradition, in the name of keeping the bloodline strong. The court stirred uncomfortably. Everyone knew this history, but no one spoke of it. It was the dark foundation their entire society rested upon. "But here's what they didn't tell you," Adelheid continued. "Here's what the Council of Seven has kept hidden in their precious archives for 300 years. The Shadowborn weren't weaker. They weren't lesser. In many ways they were stronger. They could shift faster. They lived longer. They had gifts the pure bloodlines never possessed, like the ability to mask their scent, to walk between territories undetected, to influence the minds of other wolves." Elder Burkhard's face had gone pale. "That is forbidden knowledge. How do you know?" Adelheid smiled, and it was a terrible smile. "Because I broke into your archives. Years ago, before I ever became Luna. I wanted to know why my mother had to hide. Why I had to pretend to be something I wasn't. And what I found was the truth you've been hiding. The Shadowborn weren't exterminated because they were weak. They were exterminated because they were a threat to the power structure. To the elders. To the ancient families who wanted to maintain control." "Lies," Elder Burkhard thundered. "Shadowborn propaganda meant to justify their corruption of our sacred bloodline." "Is it?" Adelheid pulled something from inside her dress. A scroll, yellowed with age, sealed with a mark no one had seen in 3 centuries. "This is the testimony of Elder Maximilian, head of the council during the Forbidden Wars. His private journal, kept hidden even from his fellow elders. Would you like me to read what he wrote? About how the Shadowborn were gaining too much influence. How they were questioning the old ways, demanding equality, threatening to overturn the hierarchy that kept certain families in power." The throne room erupted. Wolves shouting, elders protesting, guards moving forward to seize the scroll. But Casper held up a hand, and everyone froze. Because regardless of what Adelheid had done, regardless of what she'd lied about, she was still Luna. And he was still Alpha King. And his word was law. "Read it," Casper said. So Adelheid read. And with every word, the foundations of their society crumbled a little more. Maximilian's journal detailed everything. The calculated decision to label the Shadowborn as tainted, the systematic genocide disguised as protecting pack purity, the way certain families had profited from seizing Shadowborn lands and titles after their execution. It was damning. It was explosive. And it changed everything. When Adelheid finished reading, the silence in the throne room was absolute. Even Elder Burkhard seemed shaken. His certainty fractured by 300-year-old truth finally brought to light. "This doesn't change what you are," Burkhard finally said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "It doesn't change the blood in your veins. It doesn't change the fact that you lied to your pack, to your Alpha King, to everyone." "No," Adelheid agreed. "It doesn't. I am Shadowborn. I carry human blood in my veins alongside wolf blood. I am, by your ancient laws, an abomination. But I am also the Luna who brought prosperity to the northern Pax, who negotiated the peace treaty with the Eastern Territories after 2 decades of border skirmishes, who established the healing centers that cut our infant mortality rate in half, who reformed the warrior training programs that made our Pax the strongest in living memory. He turned to Casper. I lied about what I am, but I never lied about who I am. Everything I've done as Luna, I did because I believed in our people, in our future, in us. Casper looked at her for a long moment, and she couldn't read his expression. The bond between them was still there. She could feel it, that silver thread connecting their souls, but it felt stretched thin, ready to snap. The test, he finally said. We still need the test. Not because I doubt what you've just proven, but because Pack law demands it. And if we're going to change that law, if we're going to question everything our ancestors built, we need to do it properly, transparently, with no more secrets. It was a compromise, a terrible, necessary compromise. And Adelheid understood what it meant. Casper wasn't defending her, but he wasn't condemning her either. He was trying to navigate between the past and the future, between tradition and truth. Adelheid held out her hand to Griselda. The elder healer approached with the ceremonial blade. Her expression carefully neutral. The blade was old, forged from silver blessed by the moon goddess herself, according to legend. When it cut skin, it burned like ice and fire combined. The cut was quick, precise. 3 drops of blood fell onto the ancient stone set into the floor of the throne room, a relic from the Forbidden Wars, stained with the blood of countless wolves who'd been tested before her. Some had passed, some had failed. The blood hit the stone and began to change. Not immediately black, as everyone expected, but not clear either. It swirled, red and dark, mixing and separating like oil in water. And in that swirling, Adelheid saw her entire future hanging in the balance. The stone began to glow. This wasn't supposed to happen. The ancient texts described 2 outcomes: clear blood that ran off the stone or black blood that stained it. But this luminescence, this light that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly rhythm. Impossible, Griselda whispered. She fell to her knees, and her reaction set off a chain effect. Wolves throughout the throne room began dropping to their knees, their eyes wide, their faces reflecting the strange light emanating from the stone. Even Elder Burkhard sank down, his ancient bones protesting. His face transformed by something Adelheid couldn't identify. Awe, fear, both. Only Casper remained standing, staring at the glowing stone with an expression of absolute shock. What is this? Adelheid demanded. What's happening? Griselda's voice shook when she answered. It's the Moonmark, the sign of the goddess herself. It hasn't appeared in over 500 years, not since the last. She stopped, swallowed hard. Not since the last chosen Luna. The chosen Luna. Vrainy's small voice piped up from her position on the floor. Despite everything, despite the fear that must still be coursing through her, the Omega's curiosity won out. But that's just a legend. A story we tell pups. No. Elder Burkhard's voice carried a weight Adelheid had never heard before. It's not a legend. The chosen Luna was real. She was the one who united the Pax 5 centuries ago, who ended the First Forbidden War before it could destroy our kind completely. She bore the Moonmark, the blessing of the goddess that transcended bloodline, transcended Pack politics, transcended everything we think we know about what makes a wolf pure or impure. The old wolf looked up at Adelheid, and for the first time, she saw something other than judgment in his eyes. She saw wonder. The chosen Luna, he continued, was also Shadowborn. The goddess chose her not despite her mixed blood, but because of it. Because she carried both human compassion and wolf strength. Because she could bridge the divide between our kind and theirs. Because she understood what it meant to be rejected, to be othered, to fight for every scrap of dignity and respect. Adelheid felt dizzy. The light from the stone was growing brighter, and she could feel something stirring inside her. Not her wolf, something else, something ancient and powerful and vast. It felt like the full moon on her skin, like starlight in her veins, like every howl that had ever echoed through mountains and forests since the first wolves learned to shift. "This is insane," she managed. I can't be." But the stone didn't lie. The moon mark glowed brighter, and across her left palm, where Griselda had cut her, a silvery scar began to form. Not a wound but a pattern. Ancient symbols in the old tongue, the language wolves had spoken before they learned human speech, the words that had no translation but carried meanings deeper than any modern language could express. Casper moved then, finally, and he did something that sent shockwaves through every wolf present. The alpha king of the northern packs, the most powerful wolf in 5 territories, the male who'd never bent knee to anyone, not even his own father. He dropped to his knees before Adelheid. "Forgive me," he said, and his voice broke completely. "I doubted you. I questioned everything we built. I let tradition and fear make me blind to what you truly are. Not just my Luna. Not just my mate. But the chosen Luna. The one the goddess herself has marked." Tears streamed down Adelheid's face. "I'm still Shadowborn. I still lied. I still, gods Casper, I still killed people to protect my secret. I know." He reached up, took her marked hand in both of his, pressed it to his forehead in a gesture of complete submission. "And we'll deal with that. All of it. Together. But right now, in this moment, I need you to know that I see you. All of you. The lies and the truth, the darkness and the light. And I love every part of it. Every part of you." The throne room had descended into chaos. Wolves talking, arguing, shouting. Some were elated, treating this as a divine revelation. Others were skeptical, calling it Shadowborn trickery, demanding more tests. The Council of 7 had huddled together, speaking in urgent whispers about implications and prophecies and laws that would need to be rewritten. But Adelheid barely heard any of it. She was focused on Casper, on the male kneeling before her, on the bond between them that had suddenly blazed to life stronger than ever. The moon mark on her palm thrummed with power, and she could feel it connecting to something vast and incomprehensible, the collective soul of all wolves, past and present, living and dead. Elder Burkhard rose shakily to his feet. "By the ancient covenant, by the blood oath, by every law we hold sacred, I declare that the Luna has been tested and found worthy. More than worthy. She bears the moon mark of the goddess. She is chosen." But the Shadowborn blood, one of the other elders protested, "is clearly part of the goddess's design." Burkhard cut him off. "Who are we to question the moon's will? If the goddess has chosen a Shadowborn Luna, then perhaps it's time we reconsider everything we think we know about purity and power." Vraini had finally stood up, looking terrified and awed in equal measure. Adelheid walked over to the Omega, conscious of every eye on her, every wolf watching to see what the chosen Luna would do to the girl who'd tried to destroy her. "You were right to speak the truth," Adelheid said quietly. "Pack law gave you that right and you used it. That takes courage. More courage than most wolves ever show." Vraini's eyes went wide. "But I tried to expose you. I tried to. You tried to uphold the laws of our people. That's exactly what an Omega should do. What any wolf should do." Adelheid placed her unmarked hand on the girl's shoulder. "I'm not going to punish you for that. But I'm going to ask you to serve me. To be one of my personal attendants. Because I need wolves around me who aren't afraid to speak truth, even when it's dangerous. Especially when it's dangerous." The gesture was calculated, but it was also genuine. Adelheid had learned that the best way to neutralize an enemy was to make them an ally. But more than that, she meant what she'd said. She needed truth-tellers. She needed wolves who would keep her honest, keep her grounded, remind her of where she'd come from and what she'd nearly lost. Vraini dropped into a deep bow. "I am honored, Luna. I will serve you with my life." As the throne room gradually settled, as the implications of what had just happened began to sink in, Casper stood and addressed his court. "We stand at a turning point in our history. The goddess has spoken through the moon mark. She has chosen our Luna, and in doing so, she has challenged every assumption we've held about bloodlines and purity." He paused, let his words sink in. "I propose that we call a Grand Council. Representatives from every pack, every territory. We will review the laws written after the Forbidden Wars. We will question whether genocide and fear should continue to be the foundation of our society. And we will decide together what kind of wolves we want to be." It was a radical proposal. The Grand Council hadn't been called in over a century. It meant months of preparation, weeks of meetings, endless political maneuvering. It meant opening up old wounds and questioning sacred traditions. Meant change. "All in favor," Casper called out. The response wasn't unanimous. Nothing ever was in wolf politics, but it was overwhelming. Wolves raised their voices in agreement, a chorus of howls that shook the palace foundations. Even most of the Council of Seven voted yes, though Elder Burkhard looked like it physically pained him to embrace such dramatic change. As the throne room erupted in discussion and planning, Adelheid found herself standing at the center of a storm she'd never anticipated. The moon mark on her palm still glowed faintly, a constant reminder of the weight now resting on her shoulders. "Are you all right?" Casper asked quietly, pulling her aside. "No," she admitted. "I'm terrified. I'm furious. I'm relieved. I'm confused. I'm about 17 different emotions simultaneously, and I don't know which one to feel first." He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him in what felt like years. That sounds about right for someone who just had their entire life turned upside down by divine intervention. Divine intervention. Adelheid laughed weakly. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm standing, it feels more like divine chaos. Maybe the goddess has a sense of humor. A cruel one if so." They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the court swirl around them, watching history being made in real time. And despite everything, the lies, the betrayal, the blood oath, the revelation, Adelheid felt something she hadn't felt in years. Oh. But the moment of peace was short-lived. A commotion at the throne room entrance announced the arrival of a messenger, a young male wolf covered in mud and blood, his clothes torn, his face pale with exhaustion. "Alpha King," he gasped, falling to his knees. "News from the Eastern Territories. Urgent news." Casper's expression shifted instantly from tender mate to commanding alpha. "Speak." "The Eastern Alpha, Rolf of the Blood Moon Pack. He's declared war. He says the revelation of a Shadowborn Luna is an abomination. He's calling for the old laws to be enforced. He's gathering allies, preparing to march on Wintercrest within the month." The throne room fell silent. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Rolf of the Blood Moon Pack was no minor threat. He commanded the largest pack in the Eastern Territories, and he was known for his strict adherence to tradition, his hatred of anything that smacked of modernization or change. He'd opposed Casper's reforms from the beginning, had argued against the peace treaty Adelheid had negotiated. And now he had the perfect excuse to act on his hatred. "How many packs has he contacted?" Casper demanded. The messenger's face told them everything before his words did. "At least 7, my lord. Maybe more. He's calling it a holy war. A purge of Shadowborn influence from all territories." Adelheid felt her blood run cold. 7 packs. That was nearly half the Eastern Territories. If they allied with Rolf, if they marched together against Wintercrest, it would be carnage on a scale not seen since the Forbidden Wars. "This is because of me," she said quietly. "Because of what I am." "No." Casper's voice was firm. "This is because Rolf is a zealot who's been looking for an excuse to challenge my rule since I took the throne. You're just a convenient justification." But Adelheid knew better. She could see it in the faces around the throne room, the fear, the uncertainty, the whispered conversations. Some wolves here supported her, believed in the Moonmark, accepted the goddess's choice. But others were already calculating, already wondering if it might be safer to side with tradition, to distance themselves from the Shadowborn Luna before the purge came for them too. We need to prepare for war, Elder Burkhard said grimly. Reinforce our borders. Call up the warriors. Send messengers to our allies. No. Adelheid's voice cut through the planning. No war. Not yet. Every eye turned to her. Caspar looked surprised, but he didn't contradict her. Part of their bond, part of what made them work as Alpha King and Luna, was that they each had their sphere of influence. His was martial, strategic. Hers was diplomatic, political. I'll go to Rolf, she continued. I'll meet with him. I'll show him the Moonmark, explain what happened, try to make him understand. That's insane, one of the younger elders protested. He'll kill you on sight. He's called for your execution, Luna. He's not going to suddenly change his mind because you show up at his borders with a glowing hand. Maybe not. But we have to try. Adelheid looked at Caspar. We can't start a war over this. Too many wolves will die. Too many families will be destroyed. If there's even a chance that diplomacy could work, we have to take it. Caspar studied her face, and she could feel him through their bond. Feel his fear for her safety warring with his respect for her judgment. Finally he nodded. You don't go alone. Go with you. Full honor guard. We approach as Alpha King and Luna united, showing strength, not weakness. And if he attacks anyway, then we fight. Caspar's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. And we win. Because the goddess chose you, Adelheid. The moon marked you. And I'll be damned if I let some traditionalist zealot destroy what we've built. The preparations began immediately. Messages sent to loyal packs. Warriors assembled. Supplies gathered. The journey to the Eastern Territories would take 5 days if they rode hard, less if they shifted and ran, but they needed the ceremony of horses and banners, the visible display of royal power. Adelheid spent those 5 days in a blur of activity, meeting with advisors, writing proclamations to be sent to every pack in the realm, training with the royal guard, because even though she was Luna, even though she bore the Moonmark, she wasn't foolish enough to rely solely on divine protection when zealots might be throwing spears. She also spent time with Vraini, getting to know the Omega who'd inadvertently changed the course of history. The girl was clever, perceptive, and deeply loyal once you earned her trust. She told Adelheid how she'd overheard a conversation between 2 visiting wolves from a minor pack, how they'd been discussing rumors about Ursula the Unmarked and her mysterious daughter, how Vraini had put pieces together that no one else had bothered to look for. I didn't want to hurt you, Vraini admitted one evening as they sat in Adelheid's private chambers. I believed in pack law. I believed in the old ways. I thought I was doing the right thing. You were, Adelheid assured her. The tragedy isn't that you invoked pack law. The tragedy is that our laws are built on genocide and fear instead of wisdom and compassion. On the night before they were set to depart for the Eastern Territories, Caspar came to her chambers. They hadn't been intimate since the revelation in the throne room. Too much had happened, too much needed to be processed. But tonight he didn't come as Alpha King. He came as her mate. I'm terrified, he admitted, pulling her into his arms. The thought of losing you to Rolf's fanaticism, to some poisoned blade in the dark, to any of the 1,000 dangers we're riding toward. It's eating me alive. I'm terrified too, Adelheid whispered against his chest. But we don't have a choice. This is bigger than us now. Bigger than our pack even. The goddess marked me for a reason. And I think that reason is to end this cycle of fear and hatred once and for all. They made love that night with a desperation that spoke of potential goodbyes, of futures that might never come to pass. And when Adelheid finally fell asleep in Caspar's arms, she dreamed of the first chosen Luna, the Shadowborn female who'd united the packs 5 centuries ago. In the dream, the ancient Luna spoke to her. The path will be painful. Many will reject you. Some will try to kill you. But the moon has chosen you because you carry both human compassion and wolf strength. You understand suffering. You understand survival. And those who understand suffering are the only ones who can truly end it. Adelheid woke before dawn, the dream still vivid in her mind. She dressed carefully in traveling clothes designed for both practicality and symbolism, the deep blue of Northern Pack royalty, trimmed with silver thread that caught the light and echoed the moon mark on her palm. The honor guard assembled in the palace courtyard as the sun rose. 50 of Casper's best warriors, mounted on war horses bred for endurance and strength. They would ride as a show of force, yes, but also as protection. Because Rolf wasn't the only threat. There were bandits in the borderlands, rogue wolves who answered to no pack, and political rivals who might see this journey as an opportunity to remove both Alpha King and Luna in one swift strike. Vraini appeared at the last moment, carrying a small bundle. "Luna, may I ride with you? I know I'm just an Omega, but..." "You're not just anything," Adelheid cut her off gently. "You're the wolf who set all of this in motion. And yes, you may ride with us. Your courage deserves to see where this journey leads." The journey to the Eastern Territories was grueling. They rode through forests where ancient trees whispered warnings, across plains where the grass grew tall enough to hide threats, over mountains where the air grew thin and every breath burned. They camped under stars that seemed too bright, too watchful, and Adelheid couldn't shake the feeling that the goddess herself was observing their progress. On the third night they were attacked. Not by Rolf's forces, by something worse. Rogue Shadowborn, wolves who'd survived the purges by hiding in the deepest wilderness, who'd heard rumors of a Shadowborn Luna and wanted to either recruit or destroy her, depending on which would better serve their own survival. There were 20 of them, their wolves smaller than purebreds but faster, more cunning. They struck from the shadows, living up to their name, and for a terrifying moment, Adelheid thought they'd die right there on some nameless mountain pass before ever reaching the Eastern Territories. But then the Moonmark blazed to life. Not just glowing, burning with a light so bright it turned night into day. The rogue Shadowborn recoiled, hissing and snarling, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. "The Chosen!" one of them screamed. "She bears the mark. The prophecy is real." The attack stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The rogues dropped to their bellies in submission, a gesture so primal, so instinctive, that it bypassed all conscious thought. Even wolves who'd spent decades rejecting pack hierarchy, who'd sworn never to bow to any alpha again, found themselves prostrating before Adelheid's light. Their leader, a scarred female named Hedwig with one milky eye and fur the color of storm clouds, crawled forward on her belly. "Forgive us, Chosen Luna. We heard rumors, but we didn't believe. We thought it was another trick, another trap to lure us out so we could be slaughtered like our ancestors." Adelheid's hand still blazed with power, but she could feel Casper's steadying presence beside her. His hand on her shoulder, grounding her. The Moonmark wanted to do something. She could feel it pushing against her control, wanting to judge these wolves, to determine if they were worthy or corrupt. "Stand," Adelheid commanded, and her voice carried an authority that had nothing to do with her position as Luna, and everything to do with the divine power coursing through her veins. "All of you stand and face me." The rogue Shadowborn obeyed, though they kept their eyes downcast, their postures submissive. They were a ragged group, underfed, scarred, wearing mismatched armor and carrying weapons that had seen better days. These were survivors, wolves who'd been forced to live in the margins, always running, always hiding, never safe. "How many of you are there?" Adelheid asked. "How many Shadowborn survived the purges?" Hedwig's one good eye flicked up to meet hers. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. Scattered across all the territories, living in the wild places where pack law doesn't reach. We have no central leadership, no organization. Just small groups trying to survive, trying to keep our bloodlines alive. And you attacked us because we're desperate." Hedwig's voice cracked. "Because every generation there are fewer of us. Because we're slowly dying out and some of us thought, that if a Shadowborn had somehow become Luna, maybe she'd be the one to finally wipe us out completely. Prove her loyalty to the purebloods by finishing what the purges started." The words hit Adelheid like a physical blow. That these wolves, her people, because they were her people, whether she'd known them or not, that they would think she'd betray them for political expediency. But could she blame them? Hadn't she done exactly that? Hadn't she hidden what she was, murdered to protect her secret, perpetuated the very system that had nearly destroyed the Shadowborn? "I'm not here to destroy you," Adelheid said quietly. "I'm here to change everything. The goddess marked me for a reason. And I think that reason is to end the persecution of Shadowborn once and for all." Hedwig stared at her with naked hope and desperate skepticism warring in her expression. Pretty words. But words won't protect us when the zealots come with silver and fire. Words won't bring back the children we've lost, the families torn apart. "No," Adelheid agreed. "But action will. I'm riding to meet with Alpha Rolf of the Blood Moon Pack. He's declared war, called for a holy purge of Shadowborn influence. I'm going to stop him. And after that, I'm calling a grand council to rewrite the laws that made you fugitives in your own lands. You'll fail." Hedwig's voice was flat, emotionless. "Rolf is a fanatic. He'll never accept a Shadowborn Luna, Moonmark or not. He'll claim it's dark magic, trickery, a deception of the highest order. And half the packs will believe him because it's easier to cling to old hatreds than to embrace change." "Maybe," Casper interjected. "But she won't be facing him alone. She has the northern packs behind her. She has the blessing of the goddess. And now she has you." The rogue Shadowborn looked at each other uncertainly. "Us?" Hedwig asked. "You," Casper confirmed. "Join us. Ride with us to face Rolf. Show the world that Shadowborn aren't monsters hiding in the wilderness. Show them that you're wolves who deserve the same dignity, the same rights, the same protection under pack law as anyone else." "That's suicide," one of the other rogues muttered. "Rolf will slaughter us on sight." "He might try," Adelheid said. "But I won't let him. And more importantly, the Moonmark won't let him. The goddess has spoken. Anyone who attacks you attacks her chosen Luna. Are you willing to bet that Rolf is zealous enough to defy divine will?" It was a gamble. A huge, potentially catastrophic gamble. But Adelheid could see the hunger in these wolves' eyes. The desperate need to be something more than fugitives, to have a purpose beyond mere survival, to belong to something greater than their own small bands of outcasts. "I'll ride with you," Hedwig said finally. "And I think I can convince the others. But Luna, if this goes wrong, if Rolf kills us all, our blood will be on your conscience." "I know," Adelheid replied. "And I'll carry that weight. Just as I carry the weight of every Shadowborn who died because I stayed silent about what I was. Just as I carry the weight of the wolves I killed to protect my secret. I don't come to you with clean hands, Hedwig. I come to you as someone who's committed every sin you could name in the pursuit of power and safety. But I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to be worthy of this mark the goddess burned into my flesh." The conviction in her voice must have reached something in the rogue Shadowborn, because one by one, they dropped to their knees again, not in terrified submission this time, but in oath swearing. It was an ancient gesture, one that signified complete loyalty, the willingness to die for the wolf you knelt before. "We pledge ourselves to the chosen Luna," Hedwig intoned, and the others echoed her words. "Our claws are your claws. Our fangs are your fangs. Our lives are yours to spend in service of the greater good." Casper leaned close to Adelheid and whispered, "You just acquired an army of rogues. The council is going to lose their minds." "Good," Adelheid whispered back. "Let them. Change doesn't come from making the comfortable people happy. It comes from forcing them to confront realities they'd rather ignore." The expanded group continued their journey to the Eastern Territories, now numbering 70 instead of 50. The 20 Shadowborn rogues rode at the edges of the formation, and Adelheid could see the way her honor guard watched them, with suspicion, curiosity, and in some cases, barely concealed hostility. Old prejudices didn't die just because a goddess chose to mark someone. They lingered, poisoning interactions, creating tension even among allies. But she also saw moments of connection. A young warrior from Casper's guard sharing his rations with a Shadowborn female who looked half-starved. Vraini, the Omega who'd started this entire catastrophe, sitting by the campfire and listening intently as Hedwig told stories of Shadowborn history. The real history, not the sanitized version taught in pack schools. On the 5th day, they reached the borders of the Eastern Territories. And that's when they saw the army. Rolf had brought every wolf he could muster. Thousands of them, spread across the valley like a dark tide, their armor glinting in the afternoon sun, their banners snapping in the wind. The Blood Moon Pack standard, a crimson moon against a black field, flew above them all, and beneath it stood Alpha Rolf himself. He was a massive wolf in his human form, nearly 7 feet tall, with silver-shot hair and eyes the color of old amber. He wore traditional warrior's garb, all leather and steel, and he carried a blade that legend claimed had been forged from a fallen star. Whether that was true or not, the sword radiated power even from a distance. "That's more wolves than I expected," Casper said quietly. He must have called in every favor, every old alliance, every blood debt he was owed. "He's making a statement," Adelheid replied. "He wants us to turn back. To see this army and decide that diplomacy isn't worth the risk." "Is it?" Rainey asked, her voice small. "Worth the risk, I mean." Adelheid looked at the Omega, then at Hedwig and her Shadowborn rogues, then at the honor guard who'd followed her here despite knowing they might be riding to their deaths. She thought about the Grand Council she'd promised to call, about the laws that needed to be rewritten, about the future she was trying to build where wolves like her mother didn't have to hide in mountain caves, where children with mixed blood weren't slaughtered for being born wrong. "Yes," she said firmly. "It's worth it." They rode forward under a banner of parley, white silk embroidered with the moon goddess's symbol, a universal sign that they came to talk, not fight. Rolf's army parted to let them through, thousands of wolves watching in silence as Adelheid, Casper, and a small delegation rode toward the Eastern Alpha's position. Rolf didn't dismount. He sat on his warhorse, elevated above them, a deliberate power play. "So," he called out, his voice carrying across the valley, "the Shadowborn Luna finally shows her face. Tell me, how does it feel to wear a crown built on lies?" "Better than wearing righteousness built on genocide," Adelheid shot back. She dismounted, Casper following her lead, and walked forward until she stood directly in front of Rolf's horse. "I came to show you this." She held up her left hand, letting the Moonmark catch the light. It blazed in response, bright enough that wolves in the front ranks had to shield their eyes. The symbols written in the old tongue seemed to move, to dance, to sing with power that predated pack law and council edicts and all the petty politics of wolf society. Rolf's expression didn't change. "Dark magic," he declared. "Shadowborn trickery meant to deceive the faithful. Did you really think I'd fall for such an obvious deception?" "It's not deception," Elder Burkhard's voice rang out. The old wolf had insisted on joining the delegation, despite his age, despite the danger. "I've studied the ancient texts for 6 decades. I know every description of the Moonmark ever recorded. This is real. The goddess has chosen her. Then the goddess has made a mistake." Rolf finally dismounted, moving with the lethal grace of a warrior who'd survived hundreds of battles. "Or more likely, there is no goddess. Just superstitious wolves clinging to bedtime stories while our bloodlines weaken and our packs decay from within." The heresy in those words stunned everyone present. To deny the goddess was to deny the very foundation of wolf society, to reject the source of their power, their ability to shift, their connection to the moon itself. "You don't believe in the goddess?" Adelheid asked, genuinely shocked. "Then what are you fighting for? What's the point of all this if not to preserve what she gave us?" "I fight for purity," Rolf said coldly. "For the strength that comes from maintaining clear bloodlines. For the survival of our species. The Shadowborn nearly destroyed us once. They'll do it again if we let them. And I will not stand by while a tainted Luna leads us into extinction." "The Shadowborn didn't nearly destroy us," Adelheid countered. "Your ancestors did that. They slaughtered thousands of wolves, tore families apart, murdered children. They created the very weakness you claim to fight against by culling so much of our population that we've barely recovered 3 centuries later. Lies. But there was something in Rolf's eyes. A flicker of uncertainty, quickly masked. Shadowborn propaganda. No. Truth. Written in Elder Maximilian's own hand. Adelheid pulled out the journal scroll, the same one she'd read in the throne room. He documented everything. The calculated genocide. The land seizures. The way certain families profited from the purges. Would you like me to read you the parts about your own ancestors? About how the Blood Moon Pack gained the Eastern Territories by claiming them from executed Shadowborn families. Rolf's hand moved to his sword hilt. Careful, Luna. You're very close to declaring war. I'm very close to speaking truth, Adelheid corrected. And if truth is enough to start a war, then we're already damned as a species. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Thousands of wolves watched, waited, barely breathing. This moment would determine everything. War or peace, the continuation of old hatreds or the beginning of something new. And then Hedwig stepped forward. The scarred Shadowborn female walked past Adelheid, past Caspar, past Elder Burkhard, until she stood directly in front of Rolf. She looked tiny compared to him, underfed and beaten down by decades of running and hiding. But her voice when she spoke carried the weight of every Shadowborn who died in the purges. I am Hedwig, daughter of Wilhelmina, granddaughter of Beatrix, great-granddaughter of Elsbeth who died in your grandfather's purge. My bloodline goes back 12 generations in the Eastern Territories. These were our lands before your ancestors took them. These were our forests, our mountains, our homes. And we would like them back. Rolf stared at her with naked contempt. You think I care about the grievances of dead wolves? You think your bloodline means anything to me? No, Hedwig said softly. I don't. But I think you care about this. She shifted. Right there, in broad daylight, in front of thousands of witnesses, Hedwig let her wolf form emerge. And it was magnificent. Larger than any Shadowborn wolf should be. Silver-gray with markings that seemed to glow with their own inner light. This wasn't the wolf of a corrupted bloodline, of weakened genetics, of tainted blood. This was the wolf of someone touched by the goddess herself. Other Shadowborn stepped forward and shifted. 20 wolves, all of them showing the same phenomenon. Larger than they should be, marked with patterns that caught the light, radiating power that made even Rolf's elite warriors back up nervously. The Moonmark doesn't just mark the Luna, Elder Burkhard said. His voice filled with wonder. It marks all Shadowborn who accept the goddess's blessing. Transforms them. Strengthens them. Makes them into what they were always meant to be before fear and hatred forced them into hiding. Adelheid felt it then, the full weight of what the goddess had done. She hadn't just chosen Adelheid. She'd chosen all of them. Every Shadowborn, every mixed-blood wolf who'd been told they were less than, who'd been forced to hide or die. The Moonmark was an invitation, a transformation, a reclaiming of power that had been stolen 3 centuries ago. And Rolf saw it too. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the recognition that he wasn't facing a handful of weak rogues. He was facing the resurrection of an entire bloodline, blessed by divine power, led by a Luna who bore the goddess's personal mark. He could still fight. He still had the numbers, the equipment, the home territory advantage. But could he win against wolves touched by the divine? Could he explain to his followers why they were attacking blessed Shadowborn instead of corrupted ones? This changes nothing, Rolf said, but his voice lacked conviction. Blood magic, mass hallucination, some trick I haven't figured out yet. I will not be swayed by spectacle. Then you leave me no choice. Adelheid's voice hardened. I, Luna Adelheid of the Northern Pax, bearer of the Moonmark, chosen of the goddess, do hereby declare that any wolf, Shadowborn or purebred, who resides within the Northern Territories is under my personal protection. Any attack against them is an attack against me. Any violence against them is violence against the throne. And anyone who harms them will answer to both royal decree and divine judgment. The declaration rang out across the valley, carrying the force of law and prophecy combined. And in that moment, Adelheid felt something shift, not just in herself, but in the very fabric of reality. The Moonmark blazed so bright that wolves had to turn away, and she felt connected to every Shadowborn across every territory, felt their hope and fear and desperate longing for safety. She was creating a sanctuary, a place where the hunted could become whole again. Rolf's face twisted with rage. "You overstep, Luna. The northern territories are not the world. And there are many wolves who will not accept this perversion of natural order. Then let them come." Caspar stepped up beside Adelheid, his hand finding hers. "Let them come and explain to the goddess herself why they reject her chosen. Let them come and face an Alpha King and Luna united by divine will and unbreakable bonds. Let them come and discover what happens when you declare war on the moon herself." The challenge was clear. The line was drawn. And every wolf present understood that they were witnessing a moment that would echo through history. The moment when the old world ended and the new one struggled to be born. Rolf looked at his army, then at Adelheid's much smaller force, then at the Shadowborn wolves still standing in their magnificent forms, still radiating divine power. She could see him calculating, weighing, deciding. And then he did something no one expected. He laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound, but genuine nonetheless. "You magnificent, terrifying creature," he said to Adelheid. "You've backed me into a corner where the only way out is to attack a goddess-chosen Luna or back down in front of my entire army. Do you have any idea how much I hate you right now?" "Probably about as much as I hate the situation we're in," Adelheid replied honestly. "I cannot accept this." Rolf's voice dropped to something almost conversational, meant only for those close enough to hear. "Everything I believe, everything I've built my life on, everything my father taught me and his father before him. You're asking me to throw it all away because of some glowing hand and pretty words about unity." "I'm not asking you to throw anything away," Adelheid said quietly. "I'm asking you to question whether your beliefs are built on truth or fear. I'm asking you to look at wolves like Hedwig and see strength instead of corruption. I'm asking you to imagine a future where we're stronger together instead of weaker apart. And if I can't, if my beliefs are so fundamental to who I am that changing them would mean becoming someone else entirely, then you'll fight us." Adelheid met his eyes steadily. "And one way or another, this ends today." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Around them, thousands of wolves waited to see which way their alpha would break, toward war or toward peace. Rolf's hand remained on his sword hilt. "You should know that even if I stand down, others won't. There are zealots more extreme than me, wolves who would rather die than see a Shadowborn sit on any throne. This doesn't end with me." "I know," Adelheid said. "But it has to start somewhere. It has to start with someone choosing differently, even when everything in them screams to maintain the status quo. You're asking for a leap of faith. I'm offering one in return." For a long moment, Rolf stared at her. Then, slowly, deliberately, he removed his hand from his sword. "I will not bow to you," he said clearly, loud enough for all to hear. "I will not accept your authority over the eastern territories. But I will not make war on a goddess-chosen Luna. Not today. Not until I've seen proof that your Moonmark is either genuine divine blessing or the most elaborate deception in wolf history." It wasn't peace. It wasn't even a truce, really. It was more like a postponement of inevitable conflict. But it was enough. Enough to keep thousands of wolves from dying today. Enough to buy time for the Grand Council, for diplomacy, for the slow, painful work of changing minds and hearts. "Then we are agreed," Caspar said formally. "The northern and eastern territories remain at peace, pending the results of the Grand Council. All parties will send representatives. All grievances will be heard. All laws will be reviewed." "Agreed," Rolf said, though he looked like the word tasted of ash. He turned to his army. "Stand down. Return to your territories. The war is postponed." There was confusion, disappointment, even anger from some of his warriors. But they obeyed because an alpha's word was law. Slowly, reluctantly, the massive army began to disperse, thousands of wolves breaking formation and heading back toward their home territories. Adelheid felt her knees go weak with relief. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She'd prevented a war through nothing more than words, divine symbols, and sheer desperate conviction. But as Rolf prepared to leave, he turned back one more time. "Luna Adelheid," he called. "One more thing." "Yes." His amber eyes were cold, calculating. "Your mother, Ursula the Unmarked. Is she still alive?" The question hit Adelheid like a physical blow. How did he know about her mother? How did he know to ask about? "Because if she is," Rolf continued, "then you should know that there's a bounty on her head. Has been for 30 years. 10,000 pieces of silver to whoever brings her in alive. 20,000 if she's brought in dead. The bounty was placed by my father, but I've kept it active. And now that everyone knows her daughter is Luna, well, I imagine that bounty just became very tempting to a lot of wolves who need money more than they need principles." Adelheid's blood ran cold. Her mother who she hadn't seen in 7 years, who she'd left behind in those mountains to protect her, who she'd assumed was safe in obscurity. "Where?" Adelheid demanded. "Where did your father think she was?" "If I knew that, she'd already be dead," Rolf said pleasantly. "But I'm sure someone will find her eventually. Someone always does. Sweet dreams, chosen Luna. Try not to think too hard about all the wolves out there who'd love to get their hands on your last living relative." He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Adelheid standing in the valley with her heart hammering and her mind racing. It was a threat, promise, a reminder that even in apparent victory, there were still 1,000 ways this could all fall apart. "We need to find your mother," Caspar said urgently. "We need to bring her to Wintercrest where she'll be protected." "I don't know where she is," Adelheid admitted. "I left her in the mountains, but she could be anywhere by now. She never stayed in one place long. It was how she survived." "Then we search," Hedwig said, stepping forward. "The Shadowborn network. We're scattered but we're connected. We hear things, see things. If Ursula is out there, we can find her." Adelheid looked at the scarred female, at the determination in her one good eye, and felt a surge of gratitude so intense it almost brought tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "We protect our own," Hedwig replied simply. "And Ursula's daughter is the chosen Luna. That makes Ursula pack. That makes her family. That makes her worth dying for." The journey back to Wintercrest was faster, everyone eager to return to safety and begin the work of preparing for the Grand Council. But Adelheid couldn't shake the dread that had settled into her bones. Rolf's parting words echoed in her mind, a curse disguised as information. "Your mother, Bounty. Someone will find her eventually." That night, as they camped halfway home, Adelheid woke from a nightmare. Her mother's face, older and more weathered than she remembered, twisted in pain as silver blades pierced her flesh. She sat up gasping and found Caspar already awake beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "The same dream?" he asked quietly. "Every night since Rolf told me about the bounty. We'll find her, Adelheid. I promise you we'll find her." But promises, however well-intentioned, couldn't change the reality. Somewhere out there in the vast wilderness, Ursula the Unmarked was being hunted, and every wolf with empty pockets and flexible morals was now searching for the most valuable prey in living memory, the mother of the chosen Luna. When they finally reached Wintercrest 3 days later, a messenger was waiting. A young female from the southern territories, her clothes travel-stained, her face grim. "Alpha King. Luna. I bring news from the Deepwood Pack." She paused, swallowed hard. A female matching the description of Ursula the Unmarked was captured 2 days ago. She's being held in the Deepwood dungeons. Pack Alpha Werner is demanding ransom, 50,000 silver pieces, or he delivers her to whoever meets Rolf's bounty. The world tilted. Adelheid felt Caspar's arm around her waist, holding her upright, keeping her from collapsing under the weight of this news. Captured. Her mother was captured. Being held for ransom. And if Adelheid didn't pay, if she couldn't negotiate, if she couldn't somehow rescue the woman who'd given birth to her and hidden her and protected her and sacrificed everything for her. How long? Casper's voice was steel. How long until Werner makes his decision? 7 days, my lord. He said to give the Luna 7 days to raise the funds or negotiate terms. After that, the messenger couldn't finish the sentence. After that, he'd claim Rolf's bounty. After that, Ursula would die. Assemble the council, Adelheid said, and her voice surprised her with its steadiness. Send messages to every ally we have. And give me everything we know about the Deepwood Pack, about Alpha Werner, about those dungeons. If he wants to use my mother as leverage, he's about to learn what happens when you threaten the chosen Luna's family. The moon mark on her palm blazed to life, brighter than it had ever been, hot enough that she could feel it burning through flesh and bone. And in that light, Adelheid saw her path forward with perfect clarity. She would save her mother. She would confront Alpha Werner. She would do whatever necessary to keep her last living relative alive. Even if it meant watching everything she'd built, the peace, the reforms, the promise of a better future, crumble into ash. Because in the end, some bonds were stronger than thrones. Some loves were deeper than power. And some choices once made could never be unmade. The story of the Royal Luna who slapped an Omega was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning.